Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. Today's episode is about what I call life recipes, and it's going to be a quick episode, but hopefully one that you can apply very, very quickly and with great benefits. So to give you an example of one big thing that's caused me to think about life recipes, in the last 2 weeks, I've discovered something that I really enjoy that if you've listened to this program in the past, you would think is the most obvious idea ever. And yet, I just really discovered it. So if you've listened to this podcast before, you've probably heard me talk way too much about certain things that I like, one being the beach, and another more unusual thing being the One Wheel, which is an electric skateboard that I own several of. And it allows me to experience the feeling of snowboarding, but on dry land, which is, I live on dry land in Laguna Beach, so there's no snow to snowboard on. And so I enjoy both of these activities a lot. And recently, in the last 2 weeks, I've discovered something I really, really love to the point where I just want to do it all the time is, wait for it, one-wheeling on the beach. So one-wheeling on the beach. You might think, okay, that's pretty obvious if it in fact is the truth that a one-wheel can work on the beach. If you love the beach and you love one-wheeling, then you would probably love one-wheeling on the beach. And yet, I've had a one-wheel for 3 years now, almost, and I've been near beaches for most of that 3 years, but I barely explored the potential of one-wheeling on the beach. Now, I knew that some people did it. I had seen footage of it, and once or twice I had done it. And, sometimes it was pretty cool, and then sometimes it was difficult. And I remember one time in particular, I was eager to try one-wheeling on the beach, and it was a particular beach. It was, different beaches in Laguna Beach have different kinds of sand. And this particular one, when I went on it, I was expecting, it's a long beach, and I was expecting to go across the beach, and then the sand was too wet and too loose. So basically it wouldn't work. So the wheel just kind of got stuck and it spun out, and I was just stuck there. And then I just had to walk the one wheel, which probably weighs 30 pounds, across the beach. And so that was annoying. But when I look back in retrospect, it's fascinating to me in a somewhat negative way that this really deterred me. And so from that point on, and this must have been 6 or more months ago, I don't know if I had tried one-wheeling on the beach once since then. And for some reason, I don't even remember the reason, several weeks ago, I decided, I'm going to go one-wheel on the beach. And the beach, it's called Bluebird Beach, right near where I live. And the conditions happened to be that day on Bluebird Beach such that the one-wheeling on the beach was amazing. The sand was very packed. It was sometimes wet, but it was either wet, so it was packed down, or it was dry and it was packed down, and I could just ride on it like I could ride on a dirt road, and I could ride at as high a speed I'm comfortable with on any terrain rather, and I just felt really, really good. And I noticed, wow, this is so much fun. And then particularly, then when I combined the one wheel and then the beach, including the air and just the scenery, and then when it was sunny, that's even better. And then when I listened to music, and then I knew from past experience I really like singing along with music or whistling with music. And when I could just combine all of those elements, it was just amazing. And one way to think of this kind of combination, and there are lots and lots of examples in life of how when we combine things in a certain way, the overall experience is just way better than other variants of combining variables. This is a recipe. And it occurred to me recently, in the realm of cooking, we recognize that, of course, you need to be really careful about the recipe you use. If you just use too much salt or too little salt, or any given variation in an element can be huge. And people think about, okay, I got to get these ingredients and in these proportions. And it's recognized just that it pays tremendously to pay attention to the exact combination of ingredients, and including all the processes by which they're combined. So it pays to have a very good recipe and follow the recipe. And yet I noticed that in many aspects of life, we don't respect recipes nearly as much. We just think, for instance, I've talked about how I think people's playtime, often their weekends, gets wasted, and it's just, they don't think about, what's the best recipe for a good weekend in general, or what specific things and what specific recipes will I really enjoy. It's more like, the TV's around, I kind of don't feel like doing anything, so I'm just going to watch TV. Now, if there's a great show that I'm excited about, okay, that's good. And then I've planned that, and that's a good recipe, provided that I know that I'll really consistently enjoy it. But often there's just no thinking about the recipe. So I'm just using the general term life recipe, and it can apply to anything. It can apply to rejuvenation. It can apply to recreation. It can apply to work. But I find it very helpful just to think about what is a really good potential recipe. And then one of the lessons of this one wheel on the beach experiment is it's really worth it to experiment with promising recipes. So if I could go back to my former self and I had a bad experience one-wheeling on the beach, I'd say, well, okay, but you really like one-wheeling and you really like the beach and you know people one-wheel on the beach. So see if you can vary something. Like maybe there's a different beach you can go on, or maybe it's a certain time of day. And now, once I got a good initial recipe, now I've been studying it like a scientist, and now I'm starting to see, this sand at this time of day, and I want to get it at low tide, or actually a little bit after low tide, and particularly when the sun is out. And then when I'm on the beach, there are different kinds of terrain, and here's, like, ideally I want to be on the dry part of it, but if the dry part is a certain amount of loose, it's better to be on the wet part. They're just all these little details, and then my recipe's getting better and better so that I can enjoyably ride at different times of day. And I also know that at many times of day, I'm actually not going to have a good experience at all. And then I can just schedule my time so that I make sure, okay, if low tide is at 2:00, maybe 3:00 is a really good time to take a one-wheel beach ride. So what I'd ask listeners to think about is what specific life recipes work really well for you? That's question one. And then question two is, what experimental recipes might you try? What combinations of things that seem really promising might you try, and how might those pay off? And I've been thinking about this in the context of work. There's somebody I've worked with in the past that I've felt like, this person, I work really, really well with this person. I have really good intellectual chemistry, and I learn a lot when we work together, and I do better work. And I think, okay, that's worth looking at. Okay, when did things go really well? And then often the recipe, just like a cooking recipe, is very, very nuanced. And it might be, there are two people, and you might think, these two people they're more or less the same. Maybe it's marketing agencies or something, but it's just, no, one of them really has good chemistry with you. And then it's just a totally different experience. That's, a certain recipe, or maybe for a certain type of project, they work really well. And then for other projects, they don't work well. And there's just this idea of a recipe. So I like concepts that we accept in one domain, but that are even more applicable in other domains. And I think that's why I like the concept of a life recipe. So I'm very interested, particularly on the Facebook page, what life recipes have worked well for you, and then what life recipes might work well. What life recipes are you going to try to experiment with? So I hope you share that on Facebook. That's facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. Also, if you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, you can email me at alex@alexepstein.com. And if you want to sign up for the weekly mailing list to get notified about new episodes, go to humanflourishingproject.com. Also, you can find this podcast on YouTube. If you search for Human Flourishing Project on YouTube, or you can find it on iTunes and pretty much every other podcast platform. So hope you enjoyed today's episode. I look forward to hearing about different life recipes. I will talk to everyone soon, next week probably. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.